The email came at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, and I remember the exact time because my coffee was still too hot to drink and the dog was scratching at the back door, and I almost didn't open it. It was from Spencer Holt, not HR, not legal. Spencer Holt, who had been with the company for 11 months and had the title of Vice President of Strategic Operations, a title that had not existed before his father became CEO. The subject line said, "Restructuring update, action required." I set down my coffee and read it twice. My position was being eliminated, effective immediately. My access to company systems would be disabled at 8 a.m. A severance packet would be sent to my home address within 5 business days. I was to return my laptop and badge to the front desk before noon. I sat there in my kitchen in Plano, Texas, in the house I'd bought 6 years ago when things were good, and I did the math without wanting to. 18 days. My bonus was due in 18 days. I should explain what the bonus was because it wasn't just money. In 2008, when I was 31 and the company was a mid-sized regional firm called Caldwell Pruitt Asset Services, I built the compliance engine from scratch. Not managed it, not supervised a team that built it. I wrote the original architecture myself, over 14 months, in a rented apartment in Fort Worth with bad insulation and a neighbor who played bass guitar at midnight. The system, everyone called it the bridge because it bridged reporting standards between our fund clients and the SEC, became the reason Caldwell Pruitt could scale the way it did over the next decade. By 2019, we had $2.4 billion in assets under management. By 2023, when Northgate Capital came sniffing around for an acquisition, the bridge was the first thing they asked about in due diligence. That summer, before any deal was announced, the old CEO, a man named Harold Finch, who had started the firm and ran it like it was still 1997, which was annoying, but who was also scrupulously fair in a way I didn't appreciate until he was gone, sat me down and explained the situation. Northgate wanted to acquire us. The deal would close sometime in the next 2 years, depending on regulatory approval. My role in the transition would be critical. And there was a clause in my employment contract, one I'd negotiated in 2011 and largely forgotten about, that entitled me to a performance bonus of $313,000 upon the company's successful receipt of regulatory approval for a major acquisition or merger. Harold looked across his desk at me and said, "That clause is going to pay out, Robert. I want you to know that." I told him I appreciated it. What neither of us said out loud was the other part of the clause, the part buried in Section 14(6) of my original employment agreement, written by a lawyer who'd been very thorough and who was, by 2023, long retired. The clause stated that if the bonus was withheld, delayed, or the employment was terminated within 60 days of the triggering event, full intellectual property rights to any proprietary systems I had designed during my tenure would revert to me personally. Harold knew about it. I knew about it. Nobody else at the company had ever read my original contract closely enough to find it. Spencer Holt certainly hadn't. His father, Dale Holt, became CEO in January of the year everything happened. Harold Finch retired on a Friday, and by Monday, Dale was in the corner office with a new nameplate and a son who'd been handed a VP title like a party favor. Spencer was 29. He had an MBA from a school I won't name, a firm handshake, and the specific kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no by anyone who mattered. He wore European-cut suits to a company where most of us wore khakis and kept plants in our offices that we forgot to water. I tried. I genuinely tried to work with him. In March, I walked him through the bridge architecture for 2 hours on a whiteboard, explaining the compliance logic, the reporting chains, the SEC interfaces. He took notes on his phone. He nodded in the right places. At the end, he said, "Great, so it basically runs itself." And I didn't know how to explain that no, it absolutely did not run itself. And that the reason it appeared to run itself was because I had spent 17 years making it look that way. He thanked me for my time. 3 weeks later, in a staff meeting, he announced a technology modernization initiative and said the bridge would be migrated to a third-party platform by end of year. I said, carefully, that the bridge had regulatory-specific custom logic that no third-party platform would replicate without a significant rebuild. Spencer said he appreciated my institutional knowledge and they'd factor that in. The project was assigned to a 24-year-old contractor named, and I am not making this up, Bryson, who had 3 years of experience and a LinkedIn profile with a banner that said, "Building the Future." In June, Bryson's migration project hit its first wall, then its second. By August, it had quietly stalled. Spencer never mentioned it again in meetings. I noticed he'd stopped mentioning me in meetings too, except once when he referred to me as our legacy systems guy, which I understood was not a compliment. The Northgate acquisition, meanwhile, was grinding through regulatory review. The SEC filing was submitted. The Hart-Scott-Rodino waiting period began. People in the know said we were looking at a close date sometime in November. The deal was worth $640 million. My bonus would trigger on the day of regulatory approval. That day was projected to be November 14th. Spencer's email arrived on October 27th. My wife, Diane, was in the bedroom getting ready for work when I called her name. She came out in her work clothes, with her earring half on, and looked at my face and sat down across from me at the kitchen table. I turned the laptop around. She read it again. She was quiet for a moment in the way she gets quiet when she's deciding something, not panicking, just deciding. 18 days, she said. 18 days. She took her other earring off and set it on the table. Call Martin. Martin Greer was my employment attorney. I'd used him once before, years ago, for a contract negotiation, and I'd kept his card because Harold Finch told me once that every executive should have an employment attorney, the way every house should have a fire extinguisher. I called Martin at 7:15 in the morning. He answered on the third ring, which told me something about the kind of lawyer he was. I explained the situation. He asked me to forward the email and my original employment contract. There was a long pause while he read. Then he said, "Robert, do not return anything. Do not respond to that email. Do not go to the office today. I need you to give me 4 hours." I gave him 4 hours. Martin called back at 11:30 and his voice had changed. It had gotten quieter and more careful, the way people's voices get when they realize the thing they're looking at is bigger than they thought. "The clause is airtight," he said. "Section 14(c). If they don't pay you the bonus within the qualifying window, and they've already terminated you, the IP reverts. They have no idea this exists." "Probably not," I said. "Harold knew. Harold's retired in Sedona. Does anyone else at the company have any ability to operate the bridge without you?" I thought about that. Bryson had tried. The IT team had documentation, but the documentation was the version I'd written in 2018, which predated 3 significant architecture updates. There was one other person who understood the system partially, a senior analyst named Priya, who I'd trained over the past 2 years. But Priya had given notice in September and was starting a new job in December. "Not really," I said. Martin was quiet for a moment. "The Northgate deal closes November 14th. The SEC approval is what triggers your bonus clause. They fired you to avoid paying $313,000 on a $640 million deal." He paused. "They didn't read your contract." "No." "Okay." I could hear him thinking, "Here's what I want you to understand. You have 2 options. Option 1, we file for wrongful termination, demand the bonus payment, probably settle for the $310K plus legal fees, and you walk away clean. Option 2, you do nothing. You wait. The regulatory approval comes through, the bonus window triggers, they've already terminated you, they don't pay, and the IP reverts to you personally. At that point, you own the bridge. The $640 million acquisition has a problem. The dog was scratching at the back door again. I got up and let him in. What would I do with the IP? I said. License it back to them. Sell it to Northgate directly. Let them figure it out. Or and I want to be very clear that this is the most aggressive option. Do nothing at all and let the deal collapse. I stood in my kitchen in Plano with my dog leaning against my leg, and I looked at the backyard where Diane's garden was still going in the October warmth, the tomato plants she'd been nursing since April still producing, red and orange against the fence. Let me think, I said. I thought for 5 days. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't return the laptop. I got a follow-up from HR on day 2, formal and slightly threatening, and Martin responded on my behalf with a letter that cited Section 14(c) and asked them to confirm receipt. I heard nothing back for 48 hours, which told me they'd sent it to legal, and legal was reading my contract for the first time. On day 6, Dale Holt called me personally. I'd worked at that company for 17 years, and Dale Holt had never once called my personal cell phone. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was friendly in the studied way of someone who has been coached to sound friendly. He said he wanted to clear up any misunderstanding. He said he was sure we could work something out. He said, "Robert, we go back," which was not true in any meaningful sense. Martin called me after I forwarded him the voicemail. They read the contract, he said. Spencer called the next day. His message was not friendly. Then their outside counsel called Martin, and Martin called me to relay the offer. They would reinstate my employment, pay the $313,000 bonus, and we would all agree this had been an administrative error. I would sign a waiver releasing any claims related to the termination. I asked Martin what he thought. He said, "It's a fair offer. You get what you're owed. Clean exit." I asked him what happened to the Northgate deal if I declined. He was quiet for a moment. Their compliance filing is based on the bridge. If they can't demonstrate operational continuity of the system to the SEC's satisfaction, which they can't without you, the regulatory approval timeline gets complicated. Northgate has a material adverse change clause in the acquisition agreement. If the close date slips significantly, they can walk. And if Northgate walks? $640 million deal goes away. Spencer Holt's entire reason for existing at that company goes away with it. Dale Holt's legacy acquisition goes away. I thought about the whiteboard session in March, so it basically runs itself. I thought about our legacy systems guy. I thought about Bryson and his LinkedIn banner. I took the $307,000. I want to be honest about why, because I've had people tell me I was an idiot, that I should have held out, that I threw away leverage that could have been worth millions. And maybe they're right on the math. But I'm 51 years old and I've spent 17 years building something that no one in that building properly understood or respected. And what I wanted more than money was to be done. To be genuinely, completely, permanently done. Martin negotiated the final terms over 3 days. I received the $313,000 plus an additional settlement of $85,000 for the unlawful termination, plus COBRA continuation for 18 months. I signed nothing that restricted my right to speak about my own employment history. I retained the right to consult independently. I returned the laptop on a Wednesday morning. I did not go to the floor. I dropped it at the front desk with the badge and walked out into the parking lot where I'd parked my car for 17 years, and I drove home. Northgate's regulatory approval came through on November 18th, 4 days late. The bridge had 2 operational outages in the interim. Priya, to her credit, patched one of them remotely on her own time, which I found out later and which said something about her that had nothing to do with Spencer or Dale. The deal closed, $640 million as projected. Dale Holt got his acquisition. Spencer got a bonus that was probably 3 times mine. I found out about the close date from a press release. I was in the backyard with Diane when she saw it on her phone and showed me. "How do you feel?" she said. I thought about it. The November air was cold, the way it gets in North Texas when the season finally turns, that particular dry chill that comes down from the plains. Like it's over, I said. She leaned against me and we stood there for a while without talking. The tomato plants were done for the year. She'd already pulled most of them. The garden was just bare dirt and wire cages now, the kind of clean emptiness that comes after a long season, when everything that needed to grow has grown, and everything that needed to grow has grown, and everything that needed to end has ended. I went inside and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read Spencer's email 18 days before, and I opened my laptop and started looking at consulting rates for compliance architecture work. My first inquiry came in before noon. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the phone call from Dale, not Spencer's voicemail, with that coached friendliness falling apart at the edges. It's the whiteboard session in March, 2 hours of my life, explaining 17 years of work, and Spencer nodding at his phone and then saying, "So it basically runs itself." That sentence cost them more than they ever imagined. I don't think Spencer was malicious in the way people imagine villains to be. He was something more ordinary and in some ways more dangerous. He was incurious. He had been handed authority without ever having to earn understanding. And so he looked at something he didn't comprehend and decided it didn't matter. That's a specific kind of failure, and it has nothing to do with intelligence in the narrow sense. I've worked with brilliant people who made the same mistake. They see a system running smoothly and conclude the system is simple. They never ask what it took to make it smooth. What I built over 17 years wasn't just code. It was the accumulated result of thousands of small decisions, late nights in Fort Worth, arguments with regulators, patches written at 2 a.m. when a client's filing was due at 9. The reason it looked effortless was because I had made it look effortless on purpose, because that's what good work looks like from the outside. Spencer saw the surface and thought he saw the whole thing. And I have to be honest about my own part in this. For years I let myself believe that doing the work well was enough, that people would notice, that the quality would speak, that someday someone would look at what I built and understand what it actually was. That's not naivety exactly. It's something closer to a failure of self-advocacy. A belief that integrity alone protects you. It doesn't. I should have made sure more people read Section 14C. I should have had those conversations with Harold's successor before Dale Holt ever walked in the door. What I had, in the end, wasn't leverage in the aggressive sense. I never wanted the deal to collapse, never wanted to burn anything down. What I had was patience. And the lawyer who answered at 7 in the morning, and 17 years of keeping my own records and reading my own contracts. That's not dramatic, but it held. Martin asked me once, after it was all settled, whether I regretted not waiting for the IP, the $310K versus the potential of owning the bridge outright and licensing it, and the honest answer is no. Not because the money didn't matter, it did. But because I understood something about what I actually wanted that Spencer and Dale never stopped to ask themselves. What kind of work do I want to do next? The consulting inquiries that came in before noon on the day I opened my laptop again told me that the thing I'd built had value independent of any one company's opinion of it. The market knew what Spencer didn't. Diane and I stood in the backyard that November evening, and she asked how I felt, and I said it felt like it was over. And I meant that cleanly, not as defeat, as completion. The garden was bare dirt and wire cages. Everything that needed to grow had grown. Sometimes the most honest thing you can say about a chapter of your life is that it was time for it to end, and that you were the one, in the end, who understood that first.